Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Thank you for coming today, my friends. We're still waiting for our equipment, but as you all well know, we don't need the equipment to send the message to everybody in the world about what's going on in Ukraine. But before we go any further about that, let's start, as we always do, with the Ukrainian anthem.
Can we all sing loud, please? України, ні слава, ні воля, ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запанує ними, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Слава Триці!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
I would like to thank you all, my friends, for singing along with us, because nobody wants to hear only me sing. That is not a good sign. That is not good to hear. And today in particular, you know, it's a good thing. Thank you all very much for helping me out, you know, for helping all of us out, because this is a team effort, my friends. That's the only way we are going to help Ukraine. All together. All together. We will win.
All together, we will win. All together, we will win. All together, we will win.
All together. We will win.
All together, we will win.
Fighter jets for Ukraine.
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 Air defense 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 for Ukraine.
Ukraine needs those weapons, my friends, because arms keep peace. We cannot prevent ourselves from getting killed and abused by those who want to kill and abuse us if we do not have what is needed to defend ourselves. Ukraine gave up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world. Ukraine has demilitarized, has given up most of their planes, a lot of their armor, a lot of their weapons. And what did Ukraine get in return? Betrayal from the Russian terrorist regime. That is what we got. That is what the whole world needs to remember. That Ukraine has sacrificed a lot in order to achieve world peace. And that sacrifice must never be forgotten, my friends. And our job is to make sure that the whole world knows about that sacrifice. The whole world needs to know the message of the Ukrainian people. And the message is, we fight and we will win, but we need support, because Ukraine did not have the weapons necessary to beat Russia in a conventional war at the beginning of this conflict. All the way back in 2014. Ukraine, even now, still does not have everything that Ukraine needs. It has the basics. Yes, for that we are grateful for every country that has provided those weapons to help Ukraine defend itself against the Russian terrorist regime. But Ukraine needs more, because Ukraine continues to fight. The war is continuing, my friends, and we must never forget about that. Help Ukraine protect peace.
Help Ukraine protect peace.
Help Ukraine protect peace.
Help Ukraine protect peace.
Stop Russia, stop the war.
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 Arm Ukraine as you promised.
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 There are some people who unfortunately believe in the apologist argument that if only we stop providing Ukraine with weapons, this war will end. That is pure nonsense. Some of the people who believe in such nonsense are the people who we counter-protested against. The people who are members of the so-called Stop the War movement. The so-called Stop the War movement are a bunch of hypocrites and Russophiles, and we must understand what they are. We have challenged them many times to debate. We have asked them, how would they stop the war in Ukraine? They had no idea. They had no points to give. They only had silence. And silence in the face of a plea for help is the same as helping the oppressor, my friends. That is what we must always remember. But the only way for the whole world to know this is for us to not remain silent, for us to speak and tell everybody in the world what they need to know and how they can help the Ukrainian cause. Help Ukraine as you promised.
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 Ukraine, stay strong.
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 Russia is a terrorist state.
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 It should be very well known to everybody in this world that to try to demilitarize the victim, demilitarize those who are defending themselves against aggression is the same as helping the aggressor. It's the same as helping the terrorist state of Russia. The only way to stop the war in Ukraine is to help the Ukrainian people defend themselves, to help the Ukrainian people win, to help the Ukrainian people take back what is rightfully theirs, take back what Russia promised to leave for them. And Russia, of course, as they have always done in the past, have violated their promises. They broke their agreements and they attacked Ukraine. It is a sad sight to see some misguided people still side with Russia nowadays. But fortunately, thank you very much, fortunately, those people are a small minority, as the vast majority of the people who are informed in this situation support Ukraine. And for that, we all say thank you. But We must not forget that this is an urgent matter, and this matter needs to be treated with the utmost urgency. Ukraine needs help. Not tomorrow, not the day after. Now. Ukraine needs help right now. Because if Ukraine does not get that help, then this war will continue into the rest of Europe. And nobody wants that. This war is not for the Ukrainian people. This war was started against the Ukrainian people by the Russian terrorist regime. And to be completely honest, not even the Russians themselves have anything at all to gain with this war. Because as the late Prigozhin said many times in the past, this war was not started to fight against Nazis. This war was not started to defend Russian speakers or ethnic Russians. This war was started for one reason only, to enrich the Russian elites. That is the reason why this war began. That is the reason why Putin has not given up in this war, because the Russian elites still support them, at least to a large extent. And keep in mind, those elites that no longer support them find themselves looking out of windows into a very interesting scenery. And that scenery gets closer and closer and closer with every second that they look at it. Because as we all well know, there seems to be a very popular case of people dropping out of tall buildings, and only the people who oppose Putin. It's a very interesting coincidence, isn't it? Another interesting coincidence, Prigozhin, the man who tried to negotiate with Vladimir Putin, the man who tried to find an agreement with the Russian terrorist regime, was later killed by the same Russian terrorist regime he used to cooperate with. That is the fate of everybody who preaches negotiations with Russia. We cannot negotiate with a country that has broken every treaty it has made in the past. It would be foolish, it would be stupid, it would be idiotic to try to negotiate with a country like that. That is why the only way for us to end this war is to help Ukraine win it. Ukraine has made many treaties and many agreements trying to negotiate with Russia. Even after this war began, all the way back in 2014, Ukraine still attempted to find a peaceful solution. Ukraine still attempted to save lives and to stop the war. Russia did not want that. Russia wanted to continue the war because Russia felt like they had a chance of winning it. But the only reason why Russia felt like they could win this war is because of the apologists in the West who still support Russia even now. The same apologists who, to the question of how will you stop this war, answer simply peace, without then being able to provide any kind of precise solution to the current situation. We have to understand that, my friends. This is a terrible situation we are in. And the only way to get out of this terrible situation is to help Ukraine defend itself. Because Russia cannot be trusted. Russia has betrayed the Budapest Memorandum, the biggest nuclear demilitarization in human history, where Ukraine gave up their nuclear arsenal. The third biggest in the world back then. Ukraine has given it all up in order to achieve world peace. But what reward did Ukraine get for giving up this huge nuclear arsenal? Betrayal. That is what the Ukrainian people were offered from the Russian terrorist regime, from the great kleptocracy, the Khanate of Muscovy, the country-sized criminal syndicate, at the top of which still stands Vladimir Lily Putin, as many people still call it. My friends, we must not forget why we are here. We must not forget that freedom, peace, prosperity are not for free. All of these things came at a grievous cost to every people who achieved them. Now the Ukrainian people are fighting for their freedom, for their peace, for their future, for their lives. And we need to provide them with everything they need to defend themselves against this terrible force, against this terrible horde that's coming for their lands.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Thank you all here today for joining our rally. On the weekend we were talking about our defenders, about our Azovstal defenders who already been more than 500 days in captivities, more than 500 days in inhumane conditions, under the tortures, the constant harassment. Today, as we speak here now, today is Russia staging another fake criminal trial for 24 Azovstal defenders. Right today, as we hear, they staging fake trial for the 24 Azovstal defenders. The trial is currently at Rostov-on-Don in the Russian region. Again, it's absolutely shocking, unacceptable. It's not the first fake trial that Russia trying to stage to justify their crimes. And the only crimes those defenders is they allowed their land, they allowed their territory, they allowed Ukraine, and they defended Ukraine. This is the only crime they committed, but according to the Russian criminal fake trial, they seized the power and they took the power and they've been trialed for abuse of the power and seize of the territories. This is nothing else but the fake trial staged by the terrorist Russian regime for the world just to be distracted again, and mainly is for the internal Russian population just to take this and say, yeah, that we are Russians are heroes, we doing right thing. They depopulate in Ukraine. They causing crimes every day. And today's trial, today's fake trial, is no different. And it's another example of this fake trial. And what Russia is doing. They're trying to tell that black is white, and they're trying to say that they are not criminals. They're trying to say they are not terrorists. And they will do everything in their power in the world to be more divided on this subject. They invest in heavy in their propaganda, and today's trial is no different as another way of the propaganda from the terrorist Russian regime. What we're asking is for the fair trial for our prisoners of war. We're asking for the fair justice to the prisoners of war. We're asking for their release of our prisoners of war who's been held for more than 500 days now in the terrible conditions. They dying in the prisons. In our duty to keep on saying and reminding the world and all organizations who were formed to protect the fair justice trials and protect the human life as such. They need to be directly inputting into the release of the Ukrainian defenders. They need to be directly involved day in, day out to bring them home and to release them from inhumane conditions before they will die in those make-up prisons. It's not the prisons, they're torture camps that Russia make them up, and they hold in Ukrainian defenders. Not just the Azovstal defenders, but all the prisoners of war. all the Ukrainian prisoners, civilians as well. So we must make sure that the world is united on this subject. The world is strong on this subject and doing everything in their power and beyond to bring all the prisoners of war back home, to release them, to force the Russia to release them, and to stop this torture and to stop these fake trials, because there is nothing else but the fake trial done by the terrorist Russian regime. Stop Russia, stop the war.
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 Release Ukraine prisoners of war.
Release Ukraine prisoners of war.
Release prisoners of war.
Release prisoners of war.
Fair justice for prisoners.
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 Release Azovstal defenders.
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 We must make sure that this stays on the front pages. We must make sure that this information doesn't go and disappear somewhere between the vast majority of information coming across the web every day. We have to remind the world about our prisoners of war. We have to remind the world about the war in Ukraine. We have to remind the world, continue, and we will remind the world that war in Ukraine is not over. The war in Ukraine is still going on. The war started by the Russian terrorist regime on February 24, 2022. The war that flew on in Ukraine, and it's Russia and they supporters and those who trading are putting their impact and responsible and guilty for this war. Ukraine did not start the war. Russia did. Ukraine haven't invaded Russia. Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine is rightly so defending all territory, its sovereignty, its independence, and Ukraine will stay put for what rightly to be defended. They defended their homes, they defended their families under a constant bombardment, daily bombardment by the terrorist Russian regime. They standing firm and they defending. And they are heroes, they are nowadays heroes. Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україна! 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 Захисникам України тричі! Слава! 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 Glory to Ukrainian heroes! Glory! 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 Thank you. We're not talking much about what Russia did in the past. The news are changing so often that we're talking about what happening today, and then they will move on and we cease to forget. We will not forget and we will not forgive. What Russia did, even children in Ukraine perfectly understand what the terrorist regime does to their parents, why their daddy and husbands are fighting on the front lines, and why they doing it. They wake up every day under a constant fear and threat from being bombed, from being burned, from being captured and tortured. This is a reality in Ukraine. 1/5 of Ukraine, it's a war zone. 1/5 of Ukraine, it's a minefield. 1/5 of Ukraine is partly or fully destroyed and laid in rubble and ruins because of the terrorist Russian regime. Look what they did in Ukraine. The only blind person will not be able to see, but they will feel and hear what Russia does, and they will make their opinion. But for the world, it's still not enough. The Russia is still not recognized as a country, as a terrorist country who causing genocide in Ukraine. So what is the number? What is that number where you stepping over that threshold and saying, yes, this is genocide, and no, one casualty less, this is not a genocide. We should not be making any lines or thresholds. What Russia does in Ukraine, it's a pure genocide. Started on the first day when they invaded Ukraine and continue to do it daily. The scale of it changes from day to day, but the fact is the same. Every day they're killing, destroying Ukrainians, cities, villages and people, civilians as well as our soldiers, children. Russia is a terrorist state.
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 For this war to end, all is required is for Russia to stop fighting and to withdraw back from Ukraine, to go where they came from. If Russia stop fighting, this war will be over. If Ukraine stop fighting, there will be no Ukraine, and there will be no Ukrainians, and Russia will not stop there. Their imperialistic sick ambitions over the years and centuries, it's evidence and proof of that. If Russia stop fighting today, there will be no war. Ukraine got everything on the table. They cannot stop because there will be no Ukraine. Look what happening on the occupied territories. There is no right of speech. There is no freedom. They stop Ukrainian language. They shut in Ukrainian schools. In Crimea, they shut in Tatarian schools. They're not allowed to show the Ukrainian or Tatarian flags. They completely limited people's rights on the occupied territories. They do what they want, they take what they want, and they behave as they like. And most of that behavior is nothing to do with humane behavior. The interaction there, I wouldn't even call it healthy. It's an everyday survival for those few who remain under the Russian temporary occupation. Those people need the help, protection and support. But first, Ukraine needs to liberate all the territories, and Ukraine is asking for help. Ukraine is asking for help to be able to stop this war, to push the Russian aggressor back, to liberate Ukrainian territories, and to restore the peace. But Ukraine, it's all Ukraine is asking, to help as they promise, to help in the quantity that Ukraine is needed to be able to push the Russian aggressor away. Ukraine is asking for help Ukraine is asking for the fighter jets, Ukraine is asking for tanks, Ukraine is asking for ammunition, for weapons, to be able to push the aggressor back. This is what Ukraine is asking. But Ukraine should not be left as it is at the moment. World is united on the subject, saying we don't want the Ukraine to lose, and we will not Ukraine to lose. And many of our friends are united on this subject. But we're not talking about Ukraine to lose. We're talking to help Ukraine in the way that Ukraine will win this war and restore the territories, so our children, our people can live peaceful on our own land. Ukraine is not aiming for the Russian territories. Ukraine doesn't seek any Russian territories. We have no plans, no intention. What Ukraine is after is a peace. Ukraine wants to live in peace with our neighbors, with our friends, and raise Ukrainian children for their future, for our future, for future of Ukraine, and for future of the Europe. Because Europe as we know it today, because of the Russian regime, is not going to exist. Ukraine is a new country. Ukraine, after the war ends, will never be the same. People will not be the same. We will be better, because thanks to the terrorist Russian regime, Ukraine now clearly see who's enemy, and Ukraine now have a support and friends who now open their eyes to the reality and see what Russia does, what they did, and what they're capable to do to our neighbors, to any other countries. Remember, Ukraine did not start this war, as Ukraine haven't started any other wars in a history. Russia did in the last 30 years alone more than 12 wars. They live with the war, and they will not accept anything but the war. They're not willing to negotiate. They're not willing to stop this war. And they're definitely not willing to have Ukraine next door to them as a strong, powerful, independent, sovereign, democratic country that Ukraine is trying to be. We need your help, and we need your help now. We need you to stand with Ukraine for the future and the peace. Stand with Ukraine!
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 Help Ukraine protect peace!
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 Help Ukraine as you promised!
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 Help Ukraine now!
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 We all hear the latest talks about another pack of sanctions on the way against Russia. I know some of you maybe had some thoughts about how them sanctions and what they do, how they work, whether they work or not, or what Russia does to the sanctions. the Russia learning to avoid the sanctions. And it's not just the achievement of the terrorist Russian regime. It's a shame to those who trading with this terrorist regime. It's a shame to those countries, individuals and businesses who still trading or partnering with Russia, who call themselves neutral states and trying to make a peace. How can you make a peace with a wounded predator who only see the blood in his eyes and is trying to kill you at all costs? This is what Russia does now. If you making the peace and trading with Russia, the blood of Ukrainians on your hands as well. If you trading with Russia, you creating the rockets, bombs and missiles that Russia used to kill Ukrainian infrastructure and civilians. Because the money that the world is paying for the gas and oil and materials and minerals and coal that enter in the Europe, enter in Asia market, it's fueling the Russian war machine. Each tax paid by the Russian citizens to the Russian Federation, each money deposits and income going into Russia used for the more and more weapons produced by the terrorist Russian regime. So by supplying the Russia with goods and services, by buying from Russia goods and services, by trading with Russia, those automatically guilty and responsible for this war. There is a blood on the money, on the gold, on the resources that coming into the world from Russia, or the money coming into Russia. And there is a long way to be done to stop this from happening. It's been more than a year and a half since the war, full-scale war started on the peaceful Ukraine. It's been more than a year and a half, yet the world is still trading in general, business as usual, and Russia is looking for more way through the third parties, through the other companies, through the other countries, continue to trade and fuel the war machine. It's as simple enough. If you support Russia, if you're trying to make a deal and agreement and trading with Russia and Russian goods and services, you send in those rockets, missiles, tanks, planes and weapons into Ukraine that kills Ukrainian civilians, children, women, and destroy Ukrainian infrastructure. The only way to stop this war is to stop the Russia, to stop trading with Russia, and to stop all the businesses, without exception, with the terrorist Russian regime. Stop trade with Russia!
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 More sanctions on 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 Russia!
Total embargo 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 on Russia!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
I'm gonna pass it on to Pavel now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergey. Thank you very much. Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україна! 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 Героям України тричі! This war has had terrifying consequences, and we have to make sure that these consequences do not repeat themselves again. That these crimes that have been committed against the Ukrainian people never happen again against others. That is one of our main goals. That is why we speak here, to warn everybody in the world to not trust the Russian terrorist regime. We, unfortunately, have trusted them in the past. Our government has trusted them in the past. The world's governments have trusted them in the past. All of them were betrayed. All of that trust misplaced. All of these losses avoidable. All of this bloodshed meaningless. For a war that Putin started for himself and for his own crooks. All of this, it should never have happened. But unfortunately it has happened. And now we find ourselves in a terrible situation in which we have to defend ourselves, in which we have to defend our freedom and our ability to speak against the Russian terrorist regime. The Russian propaganda machine is in full throttle. They try their absolute best to twist the narrative as much as they can and to show the Ukrainian people as the villains in this war, which the Russians have started and the Russians have escalated. This war is being waged on Ukrainian soil. The Russians have come to Ukrainian land to take it, to annex it, to do God knows what with the Ukrainian people. Those who disobey them, to be killed. Those who somewhat obey them, to be brainwashed. That is how the Russian terrorist regime acts. That is what they always do. What they have done in Ukraine is not the first or the last time that they have committed the same kind of crimes. They have done a very similar thing in Georgia in 2008 when they attacked Georgia, and they claimed that supposedly it was Georgia who was planning to attack them. Because of course, that makes so much sense. Small little Georgia that has never done anything to Russia would simply try to invade Russia and take over Moscow. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Well, my friends, it doesn't. And it makes just as little sense that Ukraine had some kind of a hatred against the Russian speakers or against the Russians. A lot of people in Ukraine were Russian speakers. A lot of people are still Russian speakers now. But those numbers have diminished now because people are ashamed of speaking the same language that the oppressor speaks. What Putin has accomplished is hatred of Russia. A hatred that did not exist before this war. A hatred that could not exist as the Ukrainians saw the Russians as brothers. But that desire of friendship has been betrayed by the Russian terrorist regime. That is what everybody in the world needs to know. And let's not forget about the sacrifices of countless people who have fought and who have died for Ukraine. For all of them, I would ask you, my friends, to do a minute of silence. Thank you, my friends. Some of the people who have sacrificed the most in this war were the brave Azovstal defenders. A lot of them have been released, but most of them are still being held captive. Most of the survivors of Azovstal are being held captive, and they have been tortured by the Russian terrorist regime. One of the main reasons why Putin refuses to accept this war as a war, one of the main reasons why he sends his own people to jail if they claim that there is a war being waged between Russia and Ukraine, is that Putin wants to deny the fact that he's committing war crimes by torturing these prisoners of war. There can't be prisoners of war if there is no war. That is the childish argument that Putin made in his head. That is the childish argument that he pursues with this current situation. That is why they will not admit that they are waging a war against Ukraine, even though the vast majority of their forces and of their military might has been deployed and has been used up in Ukraine. Even though they have gone for one round mobilization and might go for another round of mobilization very soon because they're running out of troops in Ukraine. That is what Putin wants to hide from his own population. He doesn't want them to understand they're in a state of all-out war with Ukraine, because war is terrifying, and he knows that if the Russians truly realize that there is a huge war being waged right now, the biggest war in Europe ever since World War II, he knows that he will lose at least some political power. He refuses to admit this is a war because he refuses to admit that the Azovstal defenders and many other Ukrainian prisoners are prisoners of war, because Russia has no scruples and no shame when torturing those prisoners, and in the worst ways imaginable. That has been going on ever since the beginning of this war. That is what we are here to remind to everybody. For all of these people claiming that peace is the solution, that we only have to give up everything that we have fought for, everything that the Ukrainian heroes have fought for so long, the Ukrainian heroes who are still fighting, the Ukrainian heroes, some of whom are being tortured by the Russian terrorist regime, we will not give up on that. We will not give up on what they fought for, because that would be forsaking their memory and forsaking their suffering. We will give meaning to all of that. All of us together. All of us together all over the world. That is why we say, world, wake up!
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 Russia is a terrorist state!
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 Free Azovstal defenders!
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 The way Russian propaganda works is that they try to demean and destroy the reputation of the greatest heroes of the opposing side. The Azovstal defenders have been some of the greatest heroes of Ukraine, some of the bravest men to ever step foot on this planet. They were fighting in Azovstal for way longer than anybody expected them to. Even with Mariupol completely surrounded and being bombarded from all sides, they did not give up. They held for months, even after the city was surrounded. They made the Russian terrorist regime bleed for every single inch of land they took from Ukraine. They fought, and they have died, and they have defended Ukraine in the best way they could. And their memory will never be tarnished. Their memory will be remembered. We will remember about them. Their memory will be respected. That is what we are here to do, my friends. That is what everybody in the world should do. because we should understand who are the people fighting for freedom, who are the people fighting for justice, who are the people fighting for the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and all kinds of freedoms that we see as something easy to attain nowadays, that we unfortunately take for granted. But every single one of these things had a price, and that price is being paid by the Ukrainian heroes right now. It is up to us to make sure that the people all over Europe and all over the world don't have to pay that price as well. It is up to us to make sure that the warriors of Ukraine manage to win this war, so that this war does not spill any further. If Ukraine falls, Moldova will be next. That is certainty. It's not up to debate. The Russian troops are already there. They have been there ever since the Soviet Union collapsed in the region of Transnistria. They refused to remove their troops from the region, although that country is not recognized by anybody, by any respectable country at least. But Russia has found itself a little club of hated pariah states like Iran and North Korea. And what a great sight! They say that we can judge somebody by their friends, by the people they spend their time with. If that is true, then Russia is perhaps the worst country and the most despicable nation to exist right now. But that could change. If we help Ukraine win, then Russia could be reformed. There could be change. There could be betterment, even for the Russian people. We do not stand here against the Russian people themselves. We stand here against this invasion, against Putin's rule, against this idea that Ukraine is part of Russia. That is idiotic. Anybody who claims that Ukraine is part of Russia, because long ago Ukraine used to be ruled by Russia, I'm sorry to say, but you're an apologist if anybody says that. That would mean that Italy can simply come back to the UK and claim, oh, long ago this was part of the Roman Empire. We can simply come here and annex it back. Why doesn't Italy do that? Well, because Italy is not ruled by a bunch of psychopaths. Because Italy is not ruled by a bunch of misguided fools. But Russia is. In Russia, glorifying the genocidal Soviet Union is not frowned upon. It's encouraged. The same Soviet Union that started World War II on the same side as Nazi Germany and attacked Poland together, splitting it in half in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty. That is what the Soviet Union did. That is how much they liked the Nazis. And they only started fighting against them when they were attacked by them. As people say, no fire is too hot until it's your hide that's burning. That is what we can see in the Soviet Union. But once again, my friends, we have to emphasize, one of the main points we have to give is for everybody in the world to remember the heroes of Azovstal, to remember the people of Ukraine, the victims who have died by the hand of the Russian terrorist regime. Every single one of those deaths will be avenged. All of these crimes, every single one of them, Russia will be held responsible for them. Because we will not forget about these transgressions. We cannot afford to forget any longer. We have been forgetting for far too long the crimes of the past that the Soviet Union has committed, the crimes that the modern day Russian terrorist state glorifies, the crimes that we are here to remind everybody of. May nobody forget about that. Help Ukraine protect peace.
Help Ukraine protect peace.
Stop Russia, stop the war.
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 More sanctions on Russia.
More sanctions on Russia!
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 And now, my friends, we will have a short musical break.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть москалям!
Україна!
Голод усе!
Україна!
Голод усе!
Україна!
Голод усе!
Захисникам України тричі! Слава! 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 Glory to defenders! Glory! 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 Just gonna read it and translate at the same time. Yesterday, it became known that the European Football Association allowed for the international tournaments the youth football team from the Russia Federation to participate. They left they lifted the sanctions and they allowed the under 18 to participate in the sport. Just to mention that Ukraine Football Federation condemned this action, and England is standing firm with Ukraine and also does not accept it, and they condemn this decision, because and we're grateful for UK for backing to Ukraine and to standing with us on this subject, because Russia is trying to sell, stating that sport should not be and is not should be mixed with politics. The fact is that Russia has been using the sport as a politic. It's been already they politic been influenced through the sport. They professional army officers and soldiers participating in the sports, and they going back to their duties and supporting the terrorist Russian regime. So when they trying to sell their propaganda and stating that sport is out of politics, it's not true what is related to the Russia. The sport, religion, politics, they corrupted all them fields and they using for their advantage. They using for their propaganda, and they using that to push their agenda. They think imperialistic agenda, they push their laws, they push their powers. It's like a cancer, it's spreading through any possible way, just to destabilize the world, to destabilize the world institutions, to destabilize the governments and organizations. So sport is politicized in Russia, same as religion, who working for the corrupt Russian government, who working for the terrorist regime, and they should not be allowed. As a terrorist state, Russia should not be allowed in any world organization to even sit and participate, not even mention to talk or appeal or anything else. Same applicable to the sport. I've got my own children in sport, but I'm totally backing Ukrainian opposition and the Britain support in the subject that Russian athletes should not participate in the sport, while at the same time they going back supporting the terrorist regime, supporting the government that kills, destroyed, murdering, torturing and raping Ukrainian citizens and killing Ukrainian people and destroying Ukrainian as a nation, Ukrainian institutions, Ukrainian infrastructure, and at the same time saying that the sport should be out of politics. This is not fair, this is unjust, and it should not be tolerated. Russia should be expelled from all institutions, from all sports organizations, from United Nations, until they stop this bloody war in Ukraine they started. Expel Russia! Stop the war!
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 No Russian athletes in sport!
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 Stop Russia! Stop the war!
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 Total embargo on Russia!
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 No trade with 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 Russia!
It's been more than 15 months and the Russia still fighting in UN and is still vetoing everything that doesn't suit them. The world is not the same. The Europe is not the same. And the European Union need to change in line with all those challenges they face now. And the Russia should not be sitting in United Nations while they still killing, destroying Ukraine and Ukrainians. Expel Russia from UN!
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 Russia is a terrorist state!
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 The more this war goes on, the more people die and the more Russia investing heavily in their propaganda. We must make sure that we challenge this propaganda. We filter in this propaganda and not to listen to the propaganda, and make sure that we share about these meetings. We share about what's happening in Ukraine. Everyday struggle to ordinary Ukrainians, for those, most of them who lost everything. This is real, this is truth, and this is a life of those who living under a constant Russian terrorist regime temporarily. But they're living under the struggle, they're living under a constant threat. They don't know if they will wake up tomorrow and whether they're gonna die from the missile, rocket, or the Russian terrorists will come and seize the their son, their daughter, or else to go and die or kill them. This is not life. And those people need your help. And we here 3 times a week, every Wednesday, 6 to 8, Saturday, 4 to 6, Sunday, 3 to 5, to remind the world, to remind the Londoners, to remind the people, ordinary people, to remind ourselves that the war in Ukraine is not over. The Russia is terrorist state terrorizing Ukraine. They started this war and they continue this war. They might have started this war, but it's down to us, all of us, to the world civilized world, to stop supporting the Russian regime and to stop this war. And if the world become united, we lack unity. If the world become united, it's in power to stop this aggressor. They're using internal conflict inside the UN, in the world. They're using internal conflicts in the countries and in the governments for their advantage. They invest in heavy into their propaganda and into destabilizing and infiltrating their spies. They paid ambassadors or they paid politicians who speak out of their mind without thinking, but supporting the terrorist Russian regime openly or through their neutrality, by making the statements that only fueling this war, by making statements and decisions that destabilizing their own countries, their own governments, and feeding Russian propaganda with more fake news that Russia then using for their advantage, for their benefit. We must stand with Ukraine, stand united against one enemy that is obvious. It's a Russian terrorist regime. Stand with Ukraine!
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 Help Ukraine protect peace!
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 Just reading through the latest news, there's been a number of talks in the past about possible striking agreement with Ukraine, with Russia. There are possible solutions too for Ukraine to give up some of the territories in order to gain the peace and for Russia to leave Ukraine alone. These talks does not help. Imagine you walk one day into your house and you have some stranger sitting in your garden telling this is not your own garden anymore. What would be your reaction? Kick the bastard out of the garden and put a double fence. Ukraine is trying to protect and defend own territories. Ukraine integrity, territory, it should not be in any subject and it should not be used as a weapon or solution, because it's not the solution. If you give Russian the finger, they will bite the arm. And that's been in the past. One thing is, these are just the talks from those who Russia paid to make them announcements and statements, who want to be known or who want to confront their own governments or their own political parties and become more in power, become a president and so on. But good thing is, at least on the official level, the Ukraine territory is not under discussion. The World United Nations is recognizing and never accepted annexation of the Crimea, the eastern Ukraine, Donbass and Lugansk region, and at least on the official level, under the accept a few statements, few odd statements, saying maybe we should discuss and negotiate on the territories. This is not been brought up, and I hope it will never will, because Ukraine is one sovereign independent country, including Donetsk, Lugansk and Crimea, and all the rest of the territories. At the NATO headquarters, there are no discussions regarding the admission of the Ukraine to the Allies in exchange for the relinquishment of the occupied territories in favor of the Russian Federation. The head of Ukrainian mission to NATO assured this, Natalia Halibarenko. There are no such discussions in the headquarters of UN. She making this statement based on the numerous of the sources and number of the conversations on the official and unofficial level. She stated that we will remind that on the 15th of August, the Chief of Staff NATO Secretary, General Stein Jensen, suggested that Ukraine could become a member of the Allies in exchange for the territorial concessions to the Russian Federation. That's what I've been talking about before. These odd statements, it's all that Russia wants. This should not be lifted and shared on the official level with anyone. There should not be even any subject of discussions, and those statements are symbolic and should not take place, not within the organization, not anywhere in the world. As some forums where expert and non-government organizations gather, she stated that she had to hear statements that Ukraine should take into account the experience of the Germany we joined the NATO in parts. But these are informal discussions in which the ground is tested. They want to see what the reaction will be to the certain proposals. But here at NATO headquarters, there is no such a thing. Stated the Halibarenko, sorry. What I'm trying to say, Ukraine is one country, one democracy, one nation. Ukraine territory has been recognized and guaranteed by the world powers who promise to protect sovereignty, integrity, and democracy and entire territory of Ukraine against the threats. The threat is real. The threat is coming from Russian Federation, from their terrorist regime, and that threat the world needs to focus on. That threat the world needs to deal with and take into account. That threat to be eliminated. That threat should be dealt with the way there is no repeat in the future. And Ukraine is rightly so defending herself from this threat. If Ukraine stops today, there will be no Ukraine. Ukraine has got no choice. Ukraine wants the peace. Ukraine wants the peace for herself, for future of our children, and Ukraine wants the peace for the Europe. Ukraine is a Europe. Help Ukraine protect peace.
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 We don't have much time. We need to help Ukraine now, today. We don't want to have this war going on for years, what Russia wants. We want this war to end today. If we stop this war, we have a chance that current generation will have normal life, will go back to normal life without Russia. Russia caused a lot of destruction and ruined many lives of Ukrainians, and not just the Ukrainians, but people who live in Ukraine and our neighbors. The Russia has changed the lives of many, but it's down to Ukraine, to our friends, how we want to see our future. We still want to see our partnership with this terrorist regime who take everything for granted and kills and destroys. And we want to put businesses before the moral duties, businesses before the peace in Europe, just for the quick profit. War, it's expensive, it's brutal, it's terrible things, and many ordinary people died. Unfortunately, ordinary people dying. Because our soldiers today are ordinary people who took arms. Someone took arms in 2022, someone took arms in 2014. But most of these Ukrainian soldiers today give up their life, give up their jobs, give up their families to stop the aggressor. Our moral duty, everyone, to make everything possible to stop this bloody terrorist Russian regime. Without ifs, without buts. That's the only way. Again, in unity is the power. And if someone's still deciding to trade with Russia, they need to be clearly named. The world has been very lack of naming things as they are, and countries and people and governments who they are, by just wishy-washy in general. During the latest assembly, there's been a lot of talks about helping Ukraine, protecting Ukraine, everything possible. At the same time, at the back, there are trades, dealing, and sanctions are mild enough to suit few. Only if we stop trading with Russia entirely and seize all the businesses, put total embargo on Russia, this war will end straight away. The Ukrainians are doing impossible things. Without having a fleet, we're destroying Russian Navy. Without having superiority up in the air, Ukrainian destroying Russian planes and the air defense systems. Ukrainians doing impossible at the front lines. Impossible. We don't want Ukraine to become a test ground for the weapon, and we don't want Ukraine to become the test ground for the political powers. Ukrainians, ordinary Ukrainians, want peace. And we must do everything possible to restore this peace. For the sake of Ukraine, for the sake of future of Ukraine and Europe, we must stand with Ukraine and call the things as they are. That Russia causing genocide in Ukraine, the Russians are terrorizing Ukraine, destroying Ukraine. And to do just enough is not enough. Stop genocide in Ukraine!
Stop genocide in Ukraine!
Stop genocide in Ukraine!
Stop genocide in Ukraine!
Stop the genocide in Ukraine!
Stop the genocide in Ukraine!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть москалям!
Україна!
Голод усе!
Україна!
Голод усе!
Україна!
Голод усе!
Захисникам України, героям тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть москалям!
Україна!
Голод усе!
Україна!
Голод усе!
Україна!
Голод усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Друзі, я б хотів зробити невелике оголошення. На 1 жовтня, 9 ранку, буде День захисників України. Так що давайте цю дату будемо добре пам'ятати, щоб ми відсвяткували всіх захисників і захисниць України, які поклали своє життя за захист нашої країни, які дотепер борються і виграють цю війну. Але, звісно, вони тільки зможуть її виграти, якщо ми зробимо те, що ми маємо робити, щоб їм допомогти. Якщо ми продовжимо казати людям, що насправді відбувається в Україні і як цю війну треба закінчити. For all of our English-speaking friends, I'd like to make a little announcement. So, 1st October at 9 in the morning is the Day of Defenders of Ukraine. So let's not forget this date. That is the date on which we will celebrate the defenders of Ukraine, people who are fighting for the freedom, not only for the Ukrainian people, but for all of Europe and for the whole world. Because as we all well know, the Russian terrorist regime has spread its tendrils to the whole world. Not just Ukraine, not just Georgia, not just Europe, but also all over Asia, like in Syria, where they used chemical weapons in the civil war of Syria. Also in Africa. Nowadays, there's been a lot of coup d'etats in Africa. Most of them have been sponsored by the terrorist Wagner group that has been recognized as such. And keep in mind that Russia has admitted to be directly funding the Wagner group, which means automatically by default that they are directly funding a terrorist organization. Now, of course, we all well know that Russia is a terrorist state itself, but at the very least, this proves that they are at the very, very least funding terrorism. Of course, being a terrorist regime themselves. The coups in Niger, in Burkina Faso, and in Sudan are only the beginning. If the Russians get away with what they're doing now, they will do far, far worse than that. They will destabilize many more countries in order to ransack those countries for their own benefit, just like they were planning to ransack Ukraine. They were stopped, but they were not yet beaten. They need to be beaten before we can hope for peace. And I would like to mention something else that we have spoken about before, that Sari has mentioned in the past, about the Russian artists and Russian sportsmen and sportswomen. The Russians and their pets, the Russophiles and the apologists who defend and chill for them in the West all the time, have claimed that art is beyond war, that sports is beyond war, that the two things are unrelated. And yet, all the money that their sportsmen and their artists earn goes straight back to Russia to fund their genocidal war in Ukraine. Don't forget about that. And also, they claim that the people themselves, the artists and the sportsmen, have nothing to do with it. Well, we've seen too many to count Russian sportsmen and artists shilling for the Russian war in Ukraine. We have seen them wearing these brands of Z, these Z swastikas, and we can sometimes call them. We have seen it over and over again. When will the world realize that Russia uses more than just weapons in its wars? This is what's called a hybrid warfare. Something that's more complicated than just a man walking forward with guns and shooting. Something a lot more devious than that is happening in Russia and in the whole world, because Russia is trying to destabilize the rest of the world and brainwash the other people and destroy the idea of truth, of what really is going on in Ukraine. Truth does not exist in Russia anymore. The only thing that exists is what the state wants to be the truth. It's as simple as that. You can't say the truth in Russia or you'll go to jail. Simply admitting that there is a war with Ukraine right now lands you a jail sentence. Could be up to 10 years in Russia. No joke. That is a jail sentence that sometimes murderers get. And in Russia, people get that jail sentence simply for stating the truth, that there is a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. Let's not forget about that. But most importantly, all of these attempts to claim that we should not start sanctioning Russia because the poor, innocent, prosecuted Russian people will suffer. My friends, Putin was elected into power. As much as he brainwashed his own population, we cannot take all accountability away from the Russian population. The simple fact is, the Ukrainian people have no blame whatsoever in this war. And the Russian people have, at the very least, some blame. At the very least for their silence when these atrocities were happening. We are in front of a conundrum to stop Russia, to help the Ukrainian people, and potentially help even the Russian people in the future, or to continue spreading platitudes and vague sentiments and say, oh no, we can't be fighting back, we should simply lay down and allow Russia to take over. My friends, let's not be foolish. There have been many mistakes such as this one in the past made by appeasers. These appeasement tactics don't work on authoritarian and psychopathic regime like modern day Russia. That is why we deny these apologetics. That is why we say Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Stop Russia, stop the war.
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war.
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war.
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Help Ukraine as you promised.
Help Ukraine as you promised!
Help Ukraine as you promised.
Help Ukraine as you promised!
Help Ukraine as you promised.
Help Ukraine as you promised!
As we have said many times in the past, we are very grateful for every bit of help that Ukraine has received. But my friends, do not think that this help is charity. Do not think that this help comes for nothing, for freely. Ukraine has sacrificed a lot. It has sacrificed its power, it has sacrificed its ability to fight back in exchange of promises, not only from Russia, but also from the West. Promises to receive help in case the Russians decided to backtrack on their own promises. That is why Ukraine needs this help. That is why Ukraine deserves this help. That is why Ukrainians are being helped. And we must not forget about that. For anybody who claims that this is simply charity, that it's not obligatory, my friends, freedom is not charity. We all have to pay the price to have our freedom. And our freedom is being threatened right now. Make no mistake, just because this war is limited to Ukraine at the moment, doesn't mean it will always be as such. In fact, the Russians have already enabled Belarus and have forced them to participate in this war alongside them. The Russians have already prepared to invade Moldova in case Ukraine falls. The Russians are already destabilizing sub-Saharan African countries in their new attempt of neo-colonialism. Let's not forget about that. And that is what we have to say to the whole world, my friends. Our rally is close to an end. But our message does not stop here. We have to spread our message everywhere we go, so that everybody around the world has what's needed to form an informed opinion on this matter. That is what Russia wants to take away from us. The ability to see reality. The very existential threat of being what we are. That is what Russia poses against us. Watch some of their media. Watch how they speak about the West, as if it's the worst place to ever live in. And yet, their oligarchs send all of their children to the West to study in expensive schools. Here, in this supposed horrible place. Don't miss the hypocrisy of the Russian terrorist regime. Spread the good word, and we will most certainly win. All together, we will win.
All together, we will win.
All together, we will win.
All together, we will win.
All together, we will win.
All together, we will win.
Fight the jets for Ukraine.
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 Air defense 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 for Ukraine.
My friends, as a last reminder,
Let's not forget. Oh,
hello there. No worries, no worries. Just a momentary technical issue. My friends, let's not forget that our rallies happen here in 10 Downing Street every single week, 3 times. Not once, not twice, but thrice. Once on Wednesdays, as we're having it today, at 6 o'clock. Once on Saturdays at 4 o'clock. And on Sundays at 3 o'clock. Please come here, don't be shy. We welcome everybody who is willing to support Ukraine, to spread the good message about the Ukrainian people fighting for their existence against the Russian terrorist regime. So please show up here. To be here makes a real difference, because this is the place in which we can spread the word. We can tell the whole world what's going on. And that is a power that not everybody has, unfortunately. The fighters, the soldiers and warriors of Ukraine do not have that power right now. They can't be speaking to the whole world themselves. We have to do it. We have to make sure that their fight is known to every single man, woman and child around the earth. And for coming here today and spreading that message, I say to all of you, thank you. Slava Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Ворогам України тричі! And now, my friends, let's end this protest as we began it, with the lovely Ukrainian anthem.
Разом до перемоги!
Alright, guys, let's go.
Дум-дум, дум-дум, дум-дум.
Alright, we good?
Усміхнеться доля, згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануєм і ми, браття, у своїй стороні.
Смерть москалям!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Заспіваємо Україні тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Thank you all. Thank you all, first of all, for being with us today, every day, every time here on these rallies. Thank you very much.